Well, for our panel discussion on COVID-19 outbreak, how cloud technologies, AI, ML are helping us deal with the pandemic. We're looking at talking about exploring the ways AI will impact the future of work, how important it is to consider ethical dimensions when adopting AI technology, accelerating the digital transformation, how AI is going to help drive service industry during the COVID-19 pandemic, how can AI re-energize the workforce, putting AI at the core of organizations, AI for personalized healthcare, as well as solving uncertain and variable supply and demand in the market through data analytics. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by eminent panelists. First up, Hubert Etienne, the AI Ethics Research, Facebook AI, Oxford, and ENS France, Europe, joining us. Well, Hubert is a political and a moral philosopher conducting research on AI ethics and computational philosophy at Facebook AI, and I call Normal Hubert. Thank you so much, Hubert, for joining us today live at the World AI Show. And joining Hubert is going to be Arunima Sarkar, Lead Artificial Intelligence, Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution, World Economic Forum, India. Arunima has over 20 years of experience in the technology, digital, and consulting industry in research and strategy global leadership roles. Thank you so much, Arunima, for joining us today at the World AI Show. Also, we have Seham Behesi, the General Manager Digital and Connected Cars, Renault UAE. Seham has over 16 years of extensive experience. Her areas of expertise include digital and CX transformation, brand strategy, design thinking, and performance management. Thank you so much, Seham, for joining us today. We also have Hani Khalaf, the Internet of Things and Digital Cities lead, Dell Technologies, Middle East, Russia, Turkey, and Africa joining us today. Well, Hani, with over 25 years of international experience, engages with customers with their digital transformation journeys, leveraging IoT and Edge to help them improve operations and accelerate their digitization, all while leveraging big data and AI solutions. Thank you so much, Mr. Khalaf, for joining us today. And we also have our moderator, Nazreen Ibrahim, AI Ethics Officer, Social Acceptable South Africa, joining us. Well, Nazreen has an extensive broadcast portfolio presenting and producing on both television and radio. She's currently developing a continental team to secure dedicated research on AI ethics within the African continent. Thank you so much for joining us, Nazreen, on that. Well, with this, as you can see, all our eminent panelists on your stage and screen, and I would now like to pass on the live baton to our moderator, Nazreen, for taking it forth with her eminent panel. Over to you.
Bhavna, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. As we kick off panel 2 for the discussion today on the World AI Show, it's wonderful to have all our esteemed panelists from various backgrounds. When we had a discussion earlier this week, our panelists looked through the subtopics that were available to us. So the focus for our discussion today will be along 2 areas that we're looking at particularly: accelerating digital transformation using AI, data analytics, hybrid cloud during COVID-19 and the post-pandemic world. And the second will be putting AI at the core of an organization's business and operating models. Now, while we talk through those 2 subtopics, which feed, of course, into the larger theme of the conference, COVID-19 outbreak, how cloud tech, AI, ML are helping us deal with the pandemic. First, let's do a bit of a brief introduction to our panelists. Hubert, we'll start with you. Could you give us a brief intro of what your professional area of focus in everyday work comprises, and 1 word to describe yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. That's a pleasure to be with you today, and thanks for the invite. So for my part, I'm a philosopher, as it was said by Bhavana. I'm focusing on the philosophy and the ethics of AI, and I'm conducting my research at Facebook AI mostly. So I focus on different topics, but this includes, for instance, the management of misinformation for Facebook, questions related to online hate, or some much more abstract topics such as moral agents and moral decision-making. 1 word to define myself, I'd say passionate. That could be a good one.
Patient, did you say?
Yes.
Patient. I'm going to keep that in mind. So Hubert says patient. Seham, I'll go over to you. Describe a bit about your everyday, day-to-day expertise, and one word to describe yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Siham Al-Bahaisi. I'm a digital and customer experience transformation expert. And for the last 9 years, I've been leading the digital and customer experience transformation roadmap for Renault in the Middle East, focusing on digitizing customer journeys and services, and also leading the launch of connected cars in the region. About the single word, I would think about sustainability or sustainable mindset, because what drives me every day is my passion for sustainability and using technologies to make the world a better place for future generation. So sustainability, I'm in love with this word because it includes connecting being, thinking, and acting, not only for the short term, but also for the long term for our future generation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. So we've got patient, we've got sustainable. Hani, what do you do day to day, and what's one word to describe yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me here today. I'm really glad to be with my colleagues here discussing AI. On a daily basis, I live and breathe IoT, Internet of Things. I talk to customers about how IoT, Internet of Things, can bring smartness and generate outcomes to the business. That's what I do, and I do this on a regional, so no 2 days are actually the same for me. Every day is a different conversation, different customer with a different vertical. One word to describe me, I would say realistic, because in this domain you have to be realistic. You have to really be able to separate, the hype and from reality, and be able to zoom in on what can be done. Thank you.
Excellent. So we're starting to build a sort of a picture here, and we're going to go to Arunima, who's going to end off. Patient, sustainable, realistic. Those are very positive words, very powerful words. Arunima, tell us, what do you do day to day, your expertise, and one word to describe yourself?
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you for the invitation. So I am the AI lead for the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution at the World Economic Forum. I primarily work on co-designing governance frameworks and policy protocols for AI technologies, and we work with global multi-stakeholder communities in creating and co-designing these frameworks such that AI can benefit society, and at the same time mitigating any of the risks and unanticipated challenges that artificial intelligence brings along with it. I've worked in the industry for several years around growth strategies, thought leadership, research, and technology policy, specifically around analytics, data, and AI. For one word to describe myself, I would say impact-driven. I've always tried to learn, understand how emerging technologies can be applied to solving some of the societal challenges and bring the maximum impact to the largest populations. So I would say impact-driven. Thank you.
Brilliant. That's excellent. Thank you so much, Arina, for wrapping up the first part of our discussion. We've got patient, sustainable, realistic, impact-driven. And how would I describe myself as the moderator? I'll just throw it in there. Courageous. And these words are going to be important at the end of our discussion. So I would encourage you, if you're watching this panel from everywhere in the world, think of the one word that describes you, because it will be vitally important when we wrap up our discussion. Okay, to move on. Thank you so much, panelists. We'll start out by first looking at a very brief introductory remarks that we'd like to get from each of our panelists. The question here being, can we get your professional perspective on companies and governments accelerating digital transformation using AI during COVID-19 and the post-pandemic world? So I'll ask that again just for our viewers to get a sense of what we're asking. We're asking our panelists for their introductory remarks about, from their professional perspective, on how companies and governments are accelerating digital transformation using AI in this pandemic and post-pandemic world. Hubert, let's start with you.
Sure. So, I'm French, but I was in Hong Kong last fall when the second wave of the COVID-19 hit Europe. And it was an interesting spot to observe the different reactions, specifically between the Western and Eastern world. And there's one thing that really struck me at that moment, which was the very big difference in trust. That I know in the previous panel somebody talked about trust, and I think this is like the very key issue here. So that's why I want to insist very much at the beginning. The trust in governments we had on the one hand in mainland China, and on the other hand in countries such as France and the US, for instance, which tend to have very little trust in their governments. And we always talk about trust in AI and developing trustworthy AI. And sometimes we just lose of sight, what trust really means and what are the concrete application of trust or distrust in these kind of applications. And here, I think we had like very practical applications for once, which was the very slow deployments in France, for instance, of the COVID tracking applications, because people didn't trust the government. They didn't trust the technology behind. They didn't trust the use of this technology in the future. And so if you have a population which doesn't trust AI, which doesn't trust the elite, both technological and political, how do you want to do anything in these worlds at the political level, especially in difficult situations such as managing the pandemic? If people don't trust vaccines, if people don't trust your COVID tracking applications, it's going to be extremely hard to exit these very challenging situations. So perhaps as an introduction, I would just like to bring back this issue that was raised at the end of the previous panel, that of trust, but trust in the elites and specifically the political elites. How can we restore this trust in some countries where it has been undermined?
Thank you so much, Hubert. Of course, trust is an important human characteristic in the idea of understanding ethics, because does it make sense to me? Is it right or wrong? And therefore, I'm going to place my trust into it. Arunima, you're also in the space of working around ethics. Please give us your introductory remarks around accelerating digital transformation.
Right, thank you. I think Uber made some very important points around the trustworthy AI and ethics, and for all consumers and users of AI to have the trust in this technology and the benefits it will bring. I would broadly I want to say that this pandemic has really accelerated our digital future as we are seeing, and there has been a massive change, probably one of the largest and fastest ever human behavior change that we have seen at scale today. And we are seeing this amongst our consumers, amongst employees, amongst partners. And this shift in behavior has really been swift and it's been dramatic. You've seen acceleration of cloud-based services and solutions, leading to a much faster acceleration to the cloud. And companies today are getting new insights into human experiences, and technology is really creating massive opportunities. There are various new themes that are emerging. You would have seen contactless as a theme that has become prominent, contactless shopping, e-commerce deliveries rising, and a whole new set of business models that are emerging. And today we are much more aware of our dependence on these digital models, and we are not going to be going back from here. So I would try to, if we look at this new normal, I would like to highlight a few of these dimensions which are emerging today for businesses globally. And all of them are AI powered, if I may say. So to quote one of them, we are seeing more of intelligent and agile operations. So to respond quickly to supply and demand shifts, the operating models must be more intelligent and agile. We are seeing more real-time decisions happening at the edge. So a lot of the future decisions will increasingly be made at the edge by some of the frontline employees who are much more closer to the consumers. And finally, we are now seeing much more data-driven business decisions. So companies are actually using data and analytics to de-risk their revenue and cost profiles, understanding and forecasting how their revenue streams are shifting, planning for new growth areas, and rethinking how to finance innovation. So I would like to leave you with a few of these emerging new normal business dimensions that I might say that we see today in this post-pandemic world.
Absolutely, and the amount of data that's it's just boggles the mind, the amount of data we have. And what do we do with that? Who owns it? How clean is it? I'm sure we'll talk about that at some stage. Siham, I want to go to you to give us your introductory remarks, please, and from your professional perspective.
Yeah. So talking about transformation, technology is accelerating the transformation of all industries. And a few years back, it used to be said that banking industry that there will be banking everywhere, never at bank. And the same can be also said on the automotive industry. And personally, over the last 9 years, I have seen how the automotive industry has been gone through a massive wave of transformation, driven first by emerging technologies which helped envisioning the autonomous, connected, electric, and shared products for mobility, causing new business model shifts. And adding to that, COVID-19, so looking at both digital caused a culture shift, while COVID-19 caused a culture shock. Both of them actually changed massively, not only the buying behavior, but also the way we live or interact with others, or even that's what we call it the new normal. And today, and due to the fear of the virus, we are seeing new paradigms like, as mentioned by my colleagues, distance experience, contactless revolution, and the rise of low-touch economy solutions that minimize the contact with human beings. So for me, digital customer experience and providing a personalized user experience is a key. And having most of our, let's say, services or even solutions digitized, which I mean, that's it. It's really important to innovate and develop our services, which fits the new normal. We are talking today about live digital streaming of product launches, digital showrooms, usage of AR, VR, XR into buying experience, door-to-door car selling, or even servicing. So this is one aspect. Another aspect also of COVID, it was a great chance to influence the attitudes towards the consumers towards mobility, as most of the people last year, they experienced clean and fresh air in cities due to lockdowns, with ecology improving. And that's the strong proposition to make them lean towards EV, electric cars. So these, let's say, points that I want to highlight.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Siham. Finally, Hani.
Yes, hi. So I'll comment on two aspects. One is from the enterprise side and what we're seeing. So initially, beginning of the pandemic, we saw kind of a shock. Everybody was shocked, didn't know what to do. There was a period of bit of silence, and then people realized that we have to start moving. We saw a big move, of course, from a technology perspective into remote work, enabling remote workers. And many enterprises were not ready, and even government entities were not ready for this. And this was really accelerated. Some enterprises had some form of remote work, but it was really just a backup. Now it became the norm. Actually, the new normal, I don't think it's a word that we can use anymore, because we are living this new normal now. It's there everywhere. So that's it on the enterprise side. We started seeing lots also of move to the cloud initially, to deal quickly with the pandemic and situation. And then slowly towards the end of the year and beginning of this year, we started, people start talking about now hybrid clouds and multi-clouds. Actually, our chairman and CEO, Michael Dell, tweeted a few days ago, after cloud comes multi-cloud. So now people, are stepping back and thinking, okay, cloud is good, but I need to also think of something on my data center, and I need a model to run my workloads in multiple clouds at the same time. On these smart city or city levels, government levels, we are seeing a big trend now in the region to utilize data. I always say data is the most valuable asset of a city, but today it is in silos, it's everywhere. And during the pandemic, cities struggled to make decisions based on siloed information. And so today there's a big trend for these cities to gather these silos, or actually connect these siloed sources of data, bring them into a place where a decision maker can take a look, visualize, see what's happening, make faster decisions, and communicate to the agencies under them. And most importantly, use AI to predict what can happen in the future based on this collective data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hani. I think for our viewers in the audience, introductory opening remarks from our panelists from their varying backgrounds, it came across as trust that's needed from the public to accept AI systems. And Renima talked around real-time data analytics across the implementation of these various systems in the public service sector. Siham talked to a digitized or personalized experience when buying, and Hani, of course, multi-cloud approach, which is what most businesses are talking about. I want to explore multi-cloud approach, but it's actually for another question. So let's move on here. Hani and Siham, I'd like to connect your backgrounds from both the smart cities perspective and digital and the mobility ecosystem with what we've just talked about, accelerated digital transformation using AI, data analytics, and hybrid cloud. How did the pandemic impact the concept of how a smart city works for better service delivery? And Hani, we'll come back to you. How did that start?
So, like I said, the most important thing that we're seeing is this data. You know, people are realizing I can use data. Of course, to start with, during the pandemic, many e-government programs were accelerated. You know, providing citizens with services online or digital services. This was accelerated because people wanted to get service online. You know, for example, here in Dubai, where I'm based, I was able to renew my driver's license, from the comfort of my home without even sitting at all. Even the plastic card, which was, for the license for that year, the government said there is no need for it because now everything is digital. Even policemen can check things digitally. Now, the trend that we see in smart cities, big trend, is what we call integrated operation centers, which are the top level operation centers that governments are building to bring these data from hospitals, from traffic department, police, hotels, everywhere into one platform, and not all data, just relevant data to make good decisions, bringing them into a place, command and control center, command and control, integrated operation center, and really look at it and say, based on the data, collective data, and linking these data together, this is the best thing to do. And where AI can help here is by looking at this data, it can make recommendations to humans on what is the next or the best action to take, next best action to take. And this is really important because with the plethora of data around us, it's very hard for a human to analyze quickly and make decisions. And that's why we're going to depend in the future on AI to recommend decisions for us. Now, whether we want to automate the decision taking or leave a human in the middle, that's a question, I guess, that still remains.
Indeed, it does remain. The automation, of course, is what we know to be the most common rollout of AI systems across the board, especially when customers or businesses are considering it. It reminds me, and Siham, before I go to you, reminds me of an example I read recently about an insurance business in the US called Lemonade, which is making the headlines, so we can speak about it. Attributing AI as their main or primary business driver in terms of looking or clarifying claims, and how that sort of came back to bite them, because how do you accurately attribute AI and how it works in your organization? Talking also to the trust that Hubert started out talking about. So it's important to remember this, and it's a linking theme throughout. Siham, tell us about your experience from the perspective of the mobility ecosystem.
Sure. So smart mobility is one of the key enablers to make a city smart. And with the rise of digital platforms, both data and technologies play a major role in shaping the vision of this new mobility ecosystem, as you mentioned, and enabling the next generation of services. And here I agree with Hani that data, or rather the analysis of big data using artificial intelligence, is the foundation of smart mobility. And here we talk about connected cars, which is part of the Internet of Things, IoT, which produce abundant amount of data every second from inside the car, from the drivers, from the passengers, integrated sensors, connected public transport, or even integrated systems in real world environment. And those collected data unlocks valuable insights, the result which can help cities become smarter and safer by providing better transport facilities while facilitating or enforcing or developing new regulation and services. For example, in Dubai, AI has been used in the safety of the passengers on the road. In Dubai, Road and Transport Authority has started already the implementation of artificial intelligence technologies to monitor the behavior of taxi drivers on the road. The steps which was identifying the weaknesses in the professional performance of the drivers to to improve or to suggest them new training or even to help them to do the overall performance or recommendation for drivers. And also this data powers a wide range of in-vehicle services, including safety, security, navigation, infotainment, diagnostic, or even enabling dealers to offer remote service, remote diagnostic, and much more, which can improve the driving or mobility experience. And here we talk about the digital experience or the personalized experience. So data is a key here also. And additionally, the collected data has become a vital element in manufacturing plants for optimizing supply chains and manufacturing data. But in the context of smart city, and back again to the point mentioned by Hani, smart connected cars or this data cannot offer much of superior value or experience to its drivers on its own. It needs to be connected to clouds or platform of platforms that powers the whole city, and it must have two ways of communication and real-time data exchange to enable all those capabilities. So for that, I mean, we need to have a lot of synergies and communications and the global, let's say, transformation among all the key stakeholders inside this ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Siham. You're reminding me of also some news that was released recently around Germany's Bundestag, which is their lower the House of Parliament, and now passing a bill which needs to go through the other parliament houses about allowing driverless cars by 2022 on their roads, which they say will have the use cases around either medical, transportation, retirement homes, healthcare, that type of thing. So what you talked about, the application there, but again, if you look at the history of driverless cars and their experiences in other parts of the world, the trust issue is what is always the concept for me and the key. And how much of that data do we have access to if it's feeding off the very data that we're producing as citizens? That brings me to our two ethics experts on the panel. And Arima, we will begin with you. So, both your backgrounds are centered on the governance, moral, and philosophical element of AI, also commonly known as AI ethics. Arima, can you share some of the data privacy and AI ethics challenges to scaling AI use cases in global health that you have found given your work in responsible AI and governance at WEF?
Sure. So, we all know that AI holds a lot of promise in terms of beneficial, accurate, and effective preventive and curative interventions in healthcare. But at the same time, there is also increasingly an awareness of some of the potential risks and harms that might be caused by unregulated development of this technology. So just to name a few of these data privacy and AI ethics challenges that we have seen as we look at the several AI use cases in global health. So to begin with, one is around consent. So informed consent is seen as one of the key ethical requirements for any medical treatment and research, and which is to be supported by requirements of course, professional confidentiality and personal privacy. And the patients often in many cases don't know that data about them and their disease is being collected and used. The other question is around data integrity. So the accuracy and completeness of data sets which are used to power these AI solutions are key to accurate and unbiased results. Privacy, who will have access to electronic health records? Then we have the question around bias. So clinicians, they need to be confident that the decision support tools that they are working with are valid for the patient who is in front of them, and it is not just to the specific group that was part of the training data sets. This is followed by questions around patient safety and liability. So who will be responsible for harm caused by AI mistakes? And should a doctor have an automatic right to actually overrule a machine's diagnosis or decision? And in case of an error or a misdiagnosis or a misuse of this technology, or in case of any inaccurate or inappropriate data that was used to train the data sets, whose liability will it be? Is it the doctors or is it the software developers? Similarly, there are questions around algorithmic accountability. So things which we need to ensure that the algorithm is learning from its mistakes and successes. It needs to keep on incorporating new medical findings, demographic changes, the latest technological developments, and conforming to the relevant medical and healthcare standards. The question of explainability, as you all know, is important. Can a doctor be expected to act on the decisions which is made by a black box AI algorithm? And even basic questions is transparency. Does a patient even know that they're interacting with a human, or are they interacting with a bot? So there is a whole lot of these governance issues or the AI ethics and data privacy issues that come up as we look at the applications of AI in healthcare. And to tackle some of these governance issues in our work at the World Economic Forum, we have been designing governance frameworks. We have most recently designed a framework specific to conversational AI in healthcare. It's called the Chatbots Reset Framework, where we have got together a multi-stakeholder community of chatbot developers, chatbot platforms, the medical community, doctors, and academia, and regulators. And the whole objective of this framework is to design a framework which will actually help the broad adoption of the chatbots in healthcare. And we try and maximize its uses while minimizing some of these governance issues that I just mentioned.
I want to explore the idea about the chatbots more when we're looking at particular examples. And thank you so much for that, Arunima. You're reminding me a lot about, there's some work being done, I think, at Illinois University with the rights of robots. And it got me thinking about the rights of robots being given actual citizen rights like human rights. That's an interesting conversation, which I wish we had time to talk about, but Hubert, you've been patiently waiting. And my question to you, sir, is around the AI ethics component. Practically speaking, how can AI help us handle the COVID-19 situation?
There's actually many things we can do. And I'd just like to come back once again on the questions that were raised by Arunima and Hani. So the one on the responsibility of the decision taken by algorithms, especially in medical sector. And Hani, you also talk about which kind of decisions should we leave to the algorithm and which one should we keep for ourselves. And I'd like to give you two examples. So these questions, let's say, are raised in most applications, let's say sensitive applications. I'd like to give you two examples which, to my opinion, don't raise these kind of questions for once. And this is also great potential for to help us managing the COVID-19 crisis. The first one is given by a partnership we did at Facebook between Facebook and one department of New York University. And the partnership aimed at creating localized forecasting models for the spread of the outbreak based on public data given by the state of New York. And the daily predictions that we made with these models helped us to estimate the propagation of the pandemic, and especially between hospitals, the impact on the limited resources we have at the hospital level. So basically the demand of ventilators and masks. There's another one, a bit different, but with the same goal, also done with another department of NYU, where we leverage supervised and self-supervised machine learning techniques in order to learn from de-identify X-rays, scans, and other kind of clinical data in order to predict the number of patients at the hospital level whose condition is likely to improve or worsen, here again, in order to best estimate the evolution of the demand on these limited resources, and also to predict the number of newly admitted people in the next hours. So what I think is interesting here that it would raise a lot of ethical concerns if these algorithms were making decisions at the patient level on one person's life. But here we can also use it without raising much ethical concern to get fair predictions at the hospital level or between different hospitals at the state level in order to improve our answer to the COVID crisis by better management of the limited resources we have. And perhaps the last remark to conclude here, I've been talking about managing the pandemic, but I'd like to insist on the fact that the COVID-19 crisis goes far beyond just handling the pandemic. We've seen many challenging dimensions in this crisis. I'm thinking about the incredible level of misinformation and dangerous misinformation on social media. I'm talking about the rise of violence and online hate. There were some very worrisome studies showing that in many countries, we saw an increase in 30% of domestic violence. So these are issues also we need to tackle. And here again, I won't develop on this, but machine learning algorithms can help us sometimes. All the misinformation management at Facebook is based on AI. We can also detect online hate. And even when we think about platforms such as Netflix or Zoom, These also leverage machine learning lossless compression algorithms to function. So there's a lot of potential.
Indeed, there is a lot of potential. The human element combined with the enabler of technology is what we always go back to. It's the simplest way to understand it, but it's how it should be. If the human component or the human emotion can be just articulated well enough to inform how technology is accepted, it would be so nice to imagine that in an ideal world, but here we are. And this is why we're having these discussions, because we can talk about smart cities and how it's applied in our lives for better quality of life. Taking that train of thought, I want to move over to our next question for all panelists. And Hani, we'll begin with you. And the question here, or what we want to focus on, is many organizations are realizing that data and AI are an essential part of the business survival growth or growth strategy moving forward. And we've seen this all across the world. This is, of course, a direct result of the forced work from home movement globally, as we know, due to the hard lockdowns. From your recent projects, can you give us an example, just one example, of where AI, hybrid cloud, and better data sets have been implemented into a business organization for survival or growth? And Hani, we'll start with you. You are on mute, sir.
Sorry. So let me just make a quick comment here. I strongly believe that the battleground for competitiveness in the future will be the ability to use data and how much insights you can generate out of it. So everybody will have data. How much you can squeeze out of this data will be really what determines your competitive advantage. An example I can give is from actually the health sector, because this seems to be, one of the most important sectors. One of our customers, actually, which is the health authority, they wanted to improve their preparedness for the next pandemic or the next big thing that is happening. So initially, they were using, of course, bed management, ventilator availability and utilization was key for many governments and health authorities in the region. And they wanted to start understanding the use of bed, how do I find out how many beds are available in public and private hospitals, and what ventilators are available, which ones are not available, because what happened is they used to send an ambulance somewhere, and by the time the ambulance got to the hospital, the bed would not be available. So they wanted to collect this information. They started doing this manually, collecting this data, and this was not efficient. So then they moved into an integrated platform where they started pulling this information at regular intervals, near real time, into their central platform, a business intelligence platform, to make decisions. And this became much more efficient. What they're doing now is, okay, I have this source of data for health, but I need to combine it with other sources of data to make better decisions. And this is where AI comes in. So going back to the health integrated operations center idea, okay, bring all these data in addition to ambulance data, other data, weather data, hotel data, airport data, and actually even social mining. Bring data from social mining. If something is happening in one part of the world, we need to start getting these alarms early in the game so that we know something is about to happen. So they're going to fuse all this data together, use AI to better be prepared for the next thing.
And Hani, you raise an important point, because that's why smart cities will work. The aggregation of those important data sources, but combined with good connectivity and the trust of the citizens for it to work are important elements. I live in Durban, South Africa, and everyone across the world knows that we are victims to load shedding every other day. And so electricity issues here are a great threat to our economy. But I mean, this we can talk about, I'm sure, at another time. Siham, let's go over to you quickly to give us an example of the tech that you're seeing that's changing.
Yeah, maybe here I will give an example of AI application in mobility, but it's a local example by Dubai Police, forced by COVID-19. Back to April 2020, when we had the 24 hours lockdown. Those living in Dubai knows about that moment when we had 24 hours lockdown. So here we were allowed to ask for a permit in case if we want to go for essential trips, like for medical purposes or whatever shopping, because at that moment, in case if anyone went out with our cars, of course, using the radars in streets, in case of the radar, see any car, I mean, they were like all the fines were given automatically based on the movement within those streets. So back to that moment, we were allowed to ask for a permit, putting, of course, our car plate number, whatever, in case if we want to go out for essential trip. And why police using AI at that time, they were using it to evaluate or to know if our trip went really for essential or not, based on the map itself, based on the geolocation, and even the movement of our cars. So everyone was done smoothly, fast, and quick, and in a fair way, let's say, using AI and technology. And that's what's actually one of the purposes of Smart Cities vision, is to simplify the life and the time of people living in that city. So that's one of my favorite, let's say, examples.
Simplifying life is the best thing we can hear. We all want a simplified existence, especially if tech can help with that, then why not? Hubert, an example from your perspective.
So I don't focus on market development, but I'd like to share one concern with regards to this, which is, I think, going to talk to everyone. So Annie, you talk about data and extracting insights from data processing, and I'd like to insist also on the importance of having good quality data and pay attention on how you collect this data and pay attention to the limitation of the data collection process. And the concern I have today is that with the rise of work from home and forced work from home, many people have raised concerns also about the rise of surveillance tools to control employees' productivity. And I don't see any sign of this slowing down after the COVID. So if we actually engage in a world where people are called to work from home on a daily basis and to be used to this kind of surveillance, or let's say management tools to manage productivity, and also to establish new type of feedback between employers and employee, I think it's really important to keep in touch with the limitations of this. And a very short example of this, I'm using one app one app I'm using on the phone only asks for feedback, satisfaction feedback, right after it has performed the task you required and successfully. So if you only ask for feedback when the task was successfully performed, of course, the feedback is going to be positive. And then it depends what you want to do with this data. If you just want to use it to support your communication with investors, showing very good credentials on your user satisfaction, that's okay. But then if you, it gets very worrisome if you start believing at some point that the metrics accurately represents user sentiments. So keep in touch with the way you process data and how you collect it, and also keep much aware of the limitation of such data collection. That would be my message here.
Thank you so much, Hubert. These are concerns that we are having as AI ethics investigators, because it's absolutely true. Arunima, before you round up our entire discussion, it's absolutely correct in the fact that we produce so much of this data. How much of it is actually clean, is applicable, who owns it? Can we have any say or control in it as a user? Arunima, what is your thought from your perspective and your example?
Right. So to quickly add an example from one of our recent work again. So I'll again quote the example from healthcare and the increasing use of conversational and AI and chatbots that we have seen, which has been propelled by the COVID-19 pandemic-related information dissemination needs. So many global and national healthcare organizations have adopted conversational AI as a way of communicating with their constituents about the virus and the disease. And there are examples from across governments and international organizations about chatbots being used for symptom checking and as well as for information dissemination in these times with vast and huge numbers of people. So that's one example that comes to mind from my recent work around AI in healthcare. And the question of trust and all the issues that I just mentioned in AI healthcare and some of the ethics challenges, they of course remain pertinent, relevant in all these scenarios.
Thank you so much for that, Arunima. And also we are 2 minutes away from wrapping up our panel discussion. Hubert, Hani, Seham, and Arunima were incredibly wonderful. I wish we had more time to be able to draw out more of their expertise, because there are very important discussion points here about ownership of data, the aggregation of it, and what their actual output will be for better service delivery and better digital citizenry. Here at Socially Acceptable, with our organization, we are working towards a responsible digital citizenry, as are my colleagues on this panel. I want to really thank the World AI Show for bringing us together today to talk about these important issues. But before we go, I would like to request each of the panelists to give us something to think about in a few seconds, a thought about what organizations should remember when they're kicking off their AI journey. Very quickly, we'll wrap up before 12:45. And Siham, we'll begin with you.
Hi again. So thinking quickly, and with the hype with the high expectation that initially came with AI, in turn muted as companies confronted the reality of implementing the AI in our organization. If we want to implement AI, it requires an enterprise-wide digital transformation amongst the legacy and the current players. And here we need to think about dual, let's say, transformation. First is a business transformation and also the digital transformation, not only digital.
So business transformation combined with digital transformation. Got you. Exactly. Thank you so much. Hubert.
I'll be very brief. The question is, do I understand what I'm doing? So make sure you understand where the data come from, how is it processed, which purpose is it collected for, and make sure to balance also the importance of the information, like the importance of this information in your decision-making process with the limitation of your model. That's it.
Asking the right questions. Arunima.
I would say focus on the AI and human augmentation, which are the areas that AI needs to focus on and can augment the skills that are there. And prepare your workforce for this change as well. So I would probably focus on that.
Change is inevitable. Hani, sir, you are the last person on the panel.
Well, COVID-19 was the chief digitization officer, of 2020. Yeah. So I would suggest for CDOs, CIOs, regain that title and become you, the driver, behind digitization in your organization in 2021.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for this fantastic discussion. It's been a pleasure to moderate it. Please email me at naz@sociallyacceptable.co.za if you'd like to chat more, and reach out to our distinguished panelists on LinkedIn. Bhavna, back to you, and many thanks to you and the team for a wonderful show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moderating it so wonderfully. Thank you, Hani. Thank you, Arunima. Thank you, Siam. And thank you, Hubert, for joining us today at the World AI Show. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. God bless.